Hello and welcome back to Koala Moon, children's bedtime stories and meditations designed to make bedtime a dream. In tonight's story, we're joining Koko as he's settling down for bedtime in his cozy sleep cabin with his sister, Kira. All is quiet until, quite out of the ordinary, he hears a distant noise coming from Sleepy Forest, and he heads out to investigate. What he finds is the thing of dreams and fantasy. This is Koko and the Goodnight Circus, the coziest bedtime story for kids. Koko snuggled down further into his blankets and pulled his fluffy toy dinosaur tighter into his arms. He opened one eye and peeked over to where Kira was laid in her bed across the room. The golden glow from the nightlight showed that she was already sleeping, and sure enough, Koko soon began to hear her quiet, snuffly snores. Watching her made Koko begin to yawn. Gradually, his heavy eyes began to close. Just as they did, Koko heard a noise, an unusual far-away noise, unlike anything he'd heard before. It was distant and muffled, coming from somewhere within the forest. Koko glanced at Kira, but she was snoring even louder now, and looked so very cozy he couldn't possibly bring himself to wake her. Instead, he put on his soft flannel dressing gown, tied the belt in a bow, and shuffled on his slippers before tiptoeing through the cabin and out into the moonlit forest. The sounds were faint, but with every step he took into the moonlit forest, they got a little louder, and Koko knew he was headed in the right direction. As always, little golden fairy lights were strung between the trees, and lanterns shone here and there, lighting his path. As the sounds grew louder, Koko began to skip, then hop, then run along the forest path until he emerged at a clearing filled by the biggest tent he'd ever seen. The tent wasn't red and white striped like a normal big top. Instead, it was made of navy blue shiny silk, embellished with golden suns and silver moons and stars. A huge sign made from twirling letters of twisted metal, encrusted with silver gemstones, read, "The Night Circus." At the front of the tent, a piece of the canopy was pinned back to reveal a golden curtain that swayed invitingly in the wind. And next to the opening was a ticket booth manned by a giraffe in a waistcoat. A beautiful, dreamy song filled the air. A badger with glitter sprinkled all over his fur was walking on stilts with a gold top hat, and a bunch of baby raccoons were dodging in and out of his long legs, all of them giggling. A zebra in a silver dress was blowing bubbles bigger than Koko had ever seen and letting them float up into the night sky. She blew bubbles of all shapes, somehow even making one bubble float within another. Koko watched for a while, seeing how their shimmering surfaces turned between silver, pink, and green under the circus lights. A frog in a bronze all-in-one was standing stock still, face painted bronze too, so that he looked like a statue. Koko walked up the deep blue carpet that had been rolled out across the forest floor and up to the ticket desk. The giraffe beamed down at him and handed him a silver ticket that shone like the inside of a chocolate wrapper. Koko checked his dressing gown pockets to see if he had any coins in there, but his paws came out empty. The giraffe grinned. "The price of admission is 1 wish," he said. "It helps fill the air with magic. Just make your wish and you can go inside. Who knows? It might even come true." Koko screwed his eyes shut and made his wish, wishing that Kira would win the upcoming spelling bee she'd been talking about all day. When he opened his eyes again, the curtain was being held open, and he was being ushered to step on through to the night circus. Koko rubbed his eyes with his bald paws, not believing what he saw. No matter how much he rubbed his eyes, the sight stayed the same. The night circus simply was this beautiful. Dancing colours and lights and shapes drew Koko deeper into the circus tent, and he slumped into one of the comfy deck chairs circling the edge of the circular stage floor, craning his neck back to look at the ceiling. There, monkeys were doing a trapeze act, swinging one another through the sky on rope swings, flipping and making graceful movements with their arms and tails that made you think they were flying. Their fur was decorated with little gems that twinkled in the spotlights. Down on the floor in front of him, a great grey elephant was standing, all 4 giant feet on a silver ball, spreading his large ears for balance. Rainbow-coloured powder paints covered his sides, and he wore a soft blue velvet hat on his head. Not far to his side, a lion was doing gymnastics, cartwheeling and twirling ribbons, and dancing across the circle to the dreamy songs. A zebra was blowing up midnight blue balloons, twisting them into the shapes of different animals and letting them float over to members of the crowd. A bear teetered this way and that on a unicycle, with a big round silver nose pinned over his little brown one. A hippo hula hooped, throwing the hoops in the air and catching them, and then juggling silver balls while she kept jiggling her hips and keeping the hoops spinning. All of the show was soundtracked by the most beautiful music, played by a band of flamingos in the corner. Mice circled between the flamingos' feet, spinning little pirouettes, tiny little soft-furred ballerinas, twirling in time. The whole display was enchanting, and Koko found it hard to take his eyes away, so he didn't. Instead, he stayed in his seat and watched and watched and watched until he eventually grew tired and began to yawn. He'd been slowly lulled by the gentle twinkling colours and magical sounds towards sleep. Koko began to see some of the performers yawn too, in between their acts. That wouldn't do. They were all sleepy. The little koala thought it was time everyone settled down and had a rest in the long hours before the sun came up. So Koko got up, stretched, and went to talk to the closest performer, the elephant. "Good evening, sir," Koko said. The elephant smiled and said good evening in return. "Aren't you getting tired now?" Koko asked. The elephant rumpled his eyebrows as if thinking, and then said, "Actually, I think I am." He thought some more. "Actually, I definitely am." The elephant closed his eyes and yawned the biggest yawn Koko had ever seen. Koko smiled. "I thought you might be," he said. "You've done a really good job of entertaining everyone all night. But now, I think you need a good night's sleep." The elephant grinned and looked around him. "I think we all need a good night's sleep," he said, pointing at a zebra who was covering her mouth with her hoof as she yawned. "How about this?" he said. "I'll go and get the blankets, and you tell everybody it's bedtime." Koko smiled sleepily. He thought that was a wonderful idea. "Okay, I'm on it," he said. "Good night, elephant." The elephant wished him good night and went to find the blankets. Koko headed over to the lion. "Hey, Mr. Lion," he said. "I like your mane and your big paws. I think your gymnastics are wonderful. But it's late now. Aren't you tired of being topsy-turvy? I think it might be bedtime." The lion purred at the praise and said thank you to Koko before agreeing. He didn't want to do any more cartwheels tonight. It was time for bed. "You go brush your teeth and comb your mane," Koko said. "I'll tell the others. Good night, lion." The lion grinned a sleepy grin, wished Koko good night, and headed off towards the back of the tent. Next, Koko went to the hippo, giving her plenty of space so he didn't get hit by a hula hoop. "Hello, Miss Hippo," Koko said. "You've been wiggling those hula hoops for so long now." "You're super talented," he chuckled. "It's extra cool when you throw the hoops in the air and catch them. But you must be sleepy, right? I think it's time for bed now." Miss Hippo let her hula hoop twist round once, twice, 3 times more, before letting it drop to the ground and raising her arms in a ginormous stretch. "Thank you, little koala," she said. "Now you've said it." "Oh," she yawns again. "It does feel like bedtime." Koko smiled and said she should go and wash off her face paint and put on her jammies. The hippo happily did just that. "Good night, Hippo," Koko said. Next, Koko called to the zebras. "Hey, zebras," he said. "You've done amazing tonight. You make the guests feel so welcome. You're all wonderful at your jobs, but I think your job is done now. Shall we go to sleep?" The zebras let their last balloons float up, up, up to rest on the roof of the tent, and the closest one to Koko smiled. "I think you're right, Koko," she said. "Everyone's gone home to bed. It's time for us to settle down too." One by one, they trotted backstage to put their pink striped pajamas on, plait their tails, and brush their teeth. "Good night, zebras," said Koko. Then Koko went to talk to the bear. "Hey, little dude," the bear said. "Hey, Mr. Bear," Koko replied. "Are your legs tired?" The bear stepped off his unicycle and gave his legs a wiggle. "They are," he said. "Sometimes I'm having so much fun I don't even notice." Koko grinned. "That's cool," he said. "But you won't be able to cycle tomorrow if you don't rest." Mr. Bear said that he was right and gave Koko a sleepy high five before heading through to have a shower and put on his own cozy slippers. "Good night, Bear," Koko said. As the bear headed backstage, he tucked his unicycle beneath its little cover and whispered, "Good night, unicycle," quiet enough so that no one could hear it. Koko did though, and giggled at the sweet bear. The song that had been floating through the air drifted off, and Koko clapped politely. He headed over to where the flamingo band was and told them that maybe it was time to switch to lullabies and stop playing for the night. He said the flamingos must need their rest. They had been standing on one leg all day after all. That's exhausting. The flamingos agreed and put down their instruments, ruffling the fur on Koko's head as they went by. True to Koko's suggestion, they were humming lullabies as they brushed their feathers and washed their beaks. As the music calmed, the little tiny mouse ballerinas slowed their twirling, relaxing to the flats of their feet. They took off their ballet shoes and tutus and headed backstage to their matchbox-sized dressing rooms, where they changed into their soft cotton polka dot onesies, ready to snuggle down. "Good night, flamingos," Koko said. "Good night, mice." Finally, the monkeys climbed down from the roof, and Koko told them it was time for bed. They ate their midnight banana snacks and went to scrub their teeth and clean their faces, ready to fall asleep. "Good night, monkeys," Koko called. By this time, the elephant had brought a big pile of comfy cushions through to the ring and began laying them out with his trunk, putting down blankets for each animal. The lion had joined him, carrying an armful of stuffed toys, placing one on each pillow. The hippo had turned on the nightlight, which projected stars onto the tent's roof. They slowly floated across the ceiling and then floated back again, white against the dark blue of the canvas. The zebras had laid out pillows on top of each cushion to make cozy beds for each animal. The elephant's was made of a whole pile of cushions and pillows since he was so large. The bear had passed out silky sleeping masks, and the flamingos had pressed play on the lullabies that they always played when it was time to drift off. One by one, each animal climbed into their bed, pulled up their blankets and snuggled their stuffed toys in close. Each had their own special one. Some looked new, like the bear's dragon toy, whose wings still shimmered and rustled a little bit as it hadn't been hugged enough to go soft yet. Others looked ancient, like the littlest zebra's bunny, whose whole body was floppy, not just its ears. A monkey was clutching a koala toy that looked a little like Koko, tucking it under her chin as she sucked her little thumb and cuddled up. The little mice had little toys no bigger than Koko's little finger, little tiny teddies and felt mice and dolls that could fit in a thimble. Koko took a seat on the only spare comfy cushion and looked out at the cozy sea of circus performers. How sleepy the scene was, with all of these cuddly, sleepy animals. The nightlight was glowing softly. The stars were aglow, and a lullaby gently drifted from the music box in the corner, which had been wound up and would play softly all night. Koko recognized the song. It was a classical one that his grandpa played at bedtime, which had something to do with the moon. Clair de Lune, that was what it was called. Koko straightened the blanket over one of the monkeys, who was laid nearby, tucking him in like a burrito. "Would you like me to tell you a bedtime story?" Koko asked the group. Between yawns and settling sounds, sleepy yeses sounded out through the tent. "Okay," Koko said. He racked his brain for a perfect story. Should it be the one about the dinosaurs in the castle? Or about the dragon who was always dancing? He went through the storybook in his mind, flicking through the pages, until he came up with the perfect one. "It goes like this," Koko said. "Out in the jungle, oh far, far away, animals of all kinds are stopping for the day. It's time to stop running or swinging through trees. It's time for your story, so listen up, please. First, there's the elephant, the wisest of all. As large as he is, his friends are quite small. The elephant and the mice are close as can be, because friends can be friends, however unlikely. Then there's the lion, with his lush golden hair. He's king of the jungle, but he's kind and fair. He listens to everyone and always does his best. He knows that a good leader looks after the rest. Next, there's the hippo, who's brave and strong. She lives life following her own heart's song. She knows the best person you can be is you. And you should be who you are, whatever you do. Next come the zebras, the stripy hooved gang, the friendliest friends in all of the land. They love one another just as they are, because they know together they'll go extra far. The bear is strong as can be, because he stands up for what he believes. He'd stand up for you and he'd stand up for me, because he believes everyone should live happily. The flamingos are creative with the music they play. They believe that whatever they think, they can make. And just like them, you can be creative too. Just open your heart and don't worry, just do. The mice are the softest, so quiet and so sweet, and they could be missed as they twirl past your feet. But although they're quiet, they're loved just as much, because each is as special as the loudest of us. Finally, the monkeys, they make us laugh. They bring joy to the hippo, the lion, and giraffe. We love how they're silly and how they play, because isn't it nice to feel joy every day? Each animal's different in so many ways, but each has a way to brighten our day. Every animal's equal and can shine so bright. So shine your light tomorrow. But for now, good night. Koko looked out across the tent. Every animal was snoozing in their puddle of blankets. They all looked peaceful, bellies rising and falling, soft smiles on their faces. Koko smiled too. "Good night, all," Koko said. No one responded. Everyone was deep asleep. Koko's job here was done. Koko yawned. Maybe he could go to sleep now too. A soft hoot filled the tent, too gentle to wake any of the animals. It seemed not everyone was asleep yet. A white feathered owl swooped down from the rafters and landed next to Koko, hooting softly again in greeting. "Good evening, Mrs. Owl," Koko yawned. "It's not bedtime for you. What are you doing here?" The owl spread a wing around Koko's shoulder and said, "I wanted to tell you what a kind koala you are, making everyone cozy like that. And I thought you might be sleepy too. It's your turn for a bedtime story." Koko smiled sleepily. "I'd like that," he said. The owl brought Koko a blanket and pulled it over him with her beak. Koko stroked her soft feathers as he snuggled into his cushion and settled into sleep. The owl began reading to Koko in her soft voice. This is how it went. "There is a koala as small as can be, whose heart is as warm as a hot cocoa treat. He spreads happiness wherever he goes, from school to his home, to the night circus show. The little koala, so fuzzy, warm and sweet, with dressing gown on and slippers on his feet, cares so well for others and makes them so calm with his kind, kind words and his koala charm. But it's time now the koala stops thinking of others and nestles down deep in his cozy covers. It's time he gets sleepy and begins to count sheep. There he goes now, drifting straight off to sleep." The owl smiled at Koko as his eyes closed and he drifted gently off. She picked up the little koala in her large wings and put him on her feathery back. She beat her wings as gently as she could and glided into the air towards the distant glow of his little wooden cabin. Koko drifted in and out of sleep to visions of the starry sky as the owl flew him home. The forest stretched out like a green carpet beneath them, and the warm breeze tickled Koko's cheeks. The face on the moon smiled at the little koala and whispered to him, "Good night." So sleepy, his words were barely audible, Koko replied with a "good night" too. Koko's eyes were so heavy he could barely keep them open. As he blinked a few final, slow, sleepy blinks, the moon disappeared and he began to snore. The next time his eyes opened, he was in his bed. The little snores of his panda bear sister filled the room once more. Looking lazily at the room around him, Koko wondered whether the whole thing might just have been a dream. Was the night circus real? Had he really been there? He didn't even notice the soft, silky owl feather clutched tightly in his paw as he tucked it against his cheek, letting his eyes close again and dreams take over. Koko visited the night circus. Yes, indeed, that's true. But the circus was now sleeping, and so are you.